Hey everyone, this is DeagleBeagle, and today we're gonna go over the most overrated and underrated Mons of VGC 23 Series 2. So this will change over time, but right now, as of February 4th, 2023, the most underrated Pokemon are probably these ones: Hatterene, Mudsdale, Competitive Gothitelle, Glamora, Mousehold, and Sandy Shocks. They have pretty low usage compared to how good they are, and I won recently with the Hard Trick Room team with Mudsdale, and I'm just surprised no one's using Mudsdale, especially on a hard Trick Room team, because it has inner focus, which makes you immune to intimidate and flinching moves, so they can't fake you out, they can't intimidate you, they can't flinch you with something like Rock Slide, even though you'll probably go first anyways in Hard Trick Room, but maybe after it wears off. And Hatterene just has amazing offense in Trick Room. It's just a really good Pokemon. But if you're not using Hard Trick Room, then maybe it's not worth picking. So I can see why it's not super common. But on Hard Trick Room teams, it should be on almost every Hard Trick Room team because it's just really good coverage. Offensive. Okay, Competitive Gothitelle. That I tried outside of Hard Trick Room and it wasn't consistently getting boosts, so it wasn't that great. It didn't have that good of coverage, but for Trick Room, Snarl and Struggle Bug are one of the only counters for it. So, like, besides Intimidate. So, and Intimidate also gets countered by Competitive Gothitelle. So, I would use it for Fake Out support, and I had Psychic Terrain already with Indeedee, and I guess that's similar defensive typing and offensive typing, but it gets a boost from that if you use it with Indeedee, and even not, it can pretty much one-shot an Arcanine almost that has no bulk, or if you use Flare Blitz and it lowers its HP with that a little bit from the recoil, then it should be able to one-shot after a +2 boost. If not, you do have Psychic Terrain, which should one-shot it regardless. So Twisted Spoon or Colbur or something very would be good with that. And then Glamora, there's different items you can use. I've seen Scarf, Assault Vest, Sash, whatever. And it's good for Toxic Spikes installing with like Garganacl or whatever and back. So, or Dondozo even. So that's pretty good. And Mousehold, or going back to Glamora, there's other Toxic Spikers now like Iron Moth. It used to be Meowscarada. Some people still use it, like Joe UX9 still uses it, but Glamora is good. Mousehold, it is pretty good, especially with Flutter Mane. That's probably the best mon to pair with it because it has like low defense, so it can easily be knocked out by a lot of physical moves if you don't have Friend Guard. And Friend Guard allows you to, if you need to, if you have to help me hand something, you can survive a Flare Blitz from an Arcanine or something. So you don't necessarily have to take out all their physical attackers and keep Follow Me. You could Helping Hand a lot of times and one-shot one of their Pokemon if you use Specs, Terra Fairy, Flutter Mane, and then you could survive the hit from their ally that survived. Or it has a lot of special defense too, the Flutter Mane. So Mousehold, besides Flutter Mane though, you could use it with other Pokemon, but it's best with Pokemon that are very fast and offensive. So besides Flutter Mane, I can't even think of many other Pokemon that it would be best with. So I'll have to keep thinking about it, but I know you could use other Pokemon like Anahalape with Mousehold and it would do pretty well, but I just think the Mousehold Flutter Mane combo is really good. Now, Sandy Shocks is also, it has to be the best ground type that, well, probably just straight up the best ground type, or at least the most offensive ground type, the most consistently offensive ground type, because it has great speed. It outspeeds Arcanine, which Great Tusk does not outspeed Arcanine. Neither does Crocodile or some of these other Pokemon. Crocodile's not that common, but I mean, Iron Treads does outspeed Arcanine, but all it can do is an Earthquake, which won't one-shot it normally. So You would have to use Band, and I don't even think that would kill because it's a spread move. So Earth Power not being affected by Intimidate or Will-O-Wisp burning it would make Sandy Shock's really good. And it is weak to a few things, but it's not 4 times weak to anything. So you normally survive anything, one hit from anything, unless they like Terra to boost it or at Life Orb at least. Like I've seen I think a Life Orb bundle one shotted it before, but Life Orb is extremely rare, and if I saw a Life Orb in the OTS, I would have played differently. So, or you could use a bulky one, or if you have a defensive terror or follow me or fake out support, something, or just use it differently. I would use it a lot differently if I saw Life Orb on the bundle. Okay, now let's go over the most overrated Pokemon. So half of the paradoxes are overrated. I don't know if I need to name them by name, but pretty much all the worst ones, if like they're still used because people are still kind of testing them out, but that doesn't mean they're good necessarily. That just means if they're used, it's likely because they're new Pokemon in Series 2 and people are testing them out. Like Iron Jugulus or whatever is very well, it's slightly overrated because it's not used that much because most people have figured out which of the paradoxes are good or not. But you still have certain people using Pokemon like that and not using it in its best niche. Like Iron Jugulus should just be using Snarl and stuff, and maybe Hurricane and Rain. Besides that, it's kind of outclassed by other paradoxes or other Pokemon, and some Pokemon like Iron Moth are still pretty good, but they might be a little bit overrated. It's depending on how you use it. I'm not sure about the Toxic Spikes one, but if you just are using it for attacks like a normal attacker, I don't think it's that great. There's a lot of Pokemon that wall fire attacks. If you're using it for Struggle Bug though, or something different, then maybe it has a niche, even though I think Volcarona is usually better. So some of these paradoxes, just in general, aren't necessarily that good, even though I think Iron Moth is still top tier. Okay, let's just go to the rest of them. Bundle is still top tier, but it's overrated because Hydro Pump misses way too much, and you basically don't have a consistent, powerful water move. You would have to use either Hydro Pump, Whirlpool, Water Pulse, whatever, and that's not that good. But Bundle is still good even without Hydro Pump. If you use like Blizzard or something. Okay, and then Armor Rouge. Everyone's trying to counter Armor Rouge, or maybe not everyone, but every good player should have a Armor Rouge counter because indeed Armor Rouge is really common now, mostly because there's very few counters for it. So people have obviously lost to it, and they don't want to keep losing to it if it's going to remain common. So I would say Armor Rouge is somewhat overrated. I never used it in the last tournament. I don't normally use it because it only seems to work against people that are like not great team builders and don't try to counter what's beating them. So yeah, you'll beat the noob type players, but you would have probably beat them anyways. So you don't really need Armor Rouge normally. I'm not saying you should never use it, but it's not the type of Pokemon I would bring to the current metagame. Maybe if the usage goes way down and people stop feeling like they have to counter it, then it would be good to bring again. I normally recommend using stuff that isn't super common, because if it's like one of the most common things like Indeedee Armor Rouge or Iron Bundle or Flutter Mane or whatever, that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means everyone's going to try to counter it. So you might want to take that as an opportunity to use a Pokemon that like nobody's trying to counter really, and if you see it has a lot of potential, don't care what people say, just use it. Like I went with Mudsdale in the last tournament and competitive Gothitelle because I knew it was good for my team. Like Mudsdale and Hard Trick Room is just really good with Choice Band. One shots the Garganacl and the Arcanine, whatever that's bulky, that is weak to ground and would wall me otherwise. So what else do we have to say? Most people have figured out the best Pokemon by now. It's more likely that Pokemon's can be underrated in the long run rather than overrated. I'll explain that. I almost feel like I have to sneeze though. Excuse me. So let's just say going back years back when certain Pokemon used to be really centralized. I forget exactly what it used to be. Let's just say like Cresselia, Garchomp, something, 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 like Chalk or whatever it's called. Um, Actually, that may not have Garchomp in it. I don't know. Just like really standard stuff with like Heatran. I think it was Arcanine, Cresselia. And then what's the L and the K? I can't even remember. But you just basically have a really standardized game. And certain Pokemon that counter those Pokemon may be really good. For example, I forget what they call it, but it was that 2016. It was that Talonflame, Big Six. I think they called it Talonflame, Groudon, Primal, Bronzong, etc., type of team. That team, I could tell, would lose to Rayquaza Kyogre, so I had my older sibling and I used that, and my older sibling got third at nationals that year. He should have won the whole tournament, but he choked and stuff, and I got unlucky with Origin Pulse missing. I should have used Water Spout as a second water move just in case I really needed the accuracy. But anyways, that's an example of just things that are underrated in the metagame, even though that was a different time period. So certain Pokemon, it's just more likely for them to be underrated than overrated, because normally people, like I said, are gonna figure out if a Pokemon is really that good or not, like Iron Jugulus or this or that. Eventually they'll test it enough and figure out that like the usage will about represent how good it is, but there's always going to be a decent amount of underrated Pokemon that will have a niche. But with Terrastalls, I think that's going to be less common to have random unique Pokemon have a niche, because you could just Terrastall your type to counter them, or just adjust to the game by Terrastalling. So it makes it so that certain Pokemon like Houndoom or Umbreon that otherwise would be really good versus Indeedee Armarouge probably wouldn't be used, because you could just Terra Dark something and possibly use that to counter it. So thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for the next one.